Record to this. Okay, here we go.
This book tells of the destruction of Calf, a jewel of the ultramar sector. The reds are mean and they're really bad. The blues are nice and they get hammered hard. But blues are good and priceless. Save what we can and let's hear.
Welcome back again to my channel, the man who needs no introduction, because you're here every Wednesday, it feels like, which is lovely. I've got the fantastic Dan Abnett with me today, and we're going to talk all about No Fear.
That's right.
This all happened to take you back to 2012.
Good grief. Okay.
And in the Heresy set, this now is book, we're getting into the 20s now. This is book 19. So, and a
Feels
huge,
so long ago.
I know, 2012, 13 years. Lucky for us that you wrote the book. And I'm just thinking about what's going on in the Black Library in 2012. So we've got Deliverance Lost by Gab Thorpe, our lovely Raven Guard. And also Pariah came out this year.
There you go, yes.
So, I mean, it's quite prolific, isn't it? The amount of books that they put you writers through at Black Library.
Yes, I think we all worked to our own speed, and that was clearly a decent year. So
Yes, a fairly decent year. And Pariah, I must have come to some excitement. There must have been quite a lot of hysteria around that one, I would imagine.
actually, I would say not as much as you would think in hindsight. Obviously, the Eisenhower books have been very successful, and the Ravenel books too.
Yeah.
And so I went into the third trilogy, and it very much goes its own way. And the tonally is quite different and that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, hopefully people are engaged enough with these characters to want to know what's going on, even though it's a bit of a departure. And actually, it did well, but its launch was quite quiet. That is to say, there wasn't this huge fuss. It wasn't like a new Eisenhower book and everybody going berserker or whatever. And that in itself might have led to why it took a while to do the second one, because it felt like people just weren't as interested. But they were. It turns out it was a slower burn. It was a slower burn. I think there was, people needed to get their head around what was going on, and there was a slower burn. And obviously, by the time we got to Penitent, there was a much bigger reaction and a huge audience waiting for it. But it didn't feel like a big deal. No Fear, on the other hand, obviously Horus Heresy book, big stuff going on, and that felt like a big deal and was sort of got a lot of reaction the moment it came out, which goes to show you. I think sometimes it's you can give people a story that you think they're going to like, and it takes them a while to cotton onto it if it's not it's not got a big obvious explosive cover or big obvious names attached to it in terms of what's in it and that kind of stuff, and people just go, oh, what's that? That's interesting, I might get to that at some point. Oh, Ultramarines, thank you. Who knows.
I think it's so interesting how some books they really, they take time to grow, and then it's like they snowball. And now, and then looking at things now and the sequels, and we spoke recently about the Furora. If you write anything else, people are like, but I want this book now.
Yes.
To explain and manage all that. But the Horus Heresy is flying high. It's the flagship maybe of Black Library.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a really good example. Just to follow up on that, those two things there, those two books, obviously Black Library very happy to publish another book in the Eisenhorn series, but that was very much them going, what do you want to do? And I said, I would like to do this because I think it'd be interesting and different. They went, go ahead there. Whereas No Fear, obviously, it's like, we need the next Heresy book. You're next up in the driving seat. This is what it is. Very much, this is the thing that they want at that point. And I'm absolutely happy to do both of those things. But they are quite an interesting contrast because, let's say, one of them is more sort of me generating something that I think would be interesting, and the other one is them saying, we want you to do this. And I'm going, yeah, great. So, yeah. But yes, it was absolutely flying high at that point. When I said it seems like a long time ago, it feels like a long time ago, more in terms of the number of books since in the series, in the Heresy series, than in terms of the number of years. But
Yeah.
both are true.
Well, we've got one of your mirror imaging. We've got one of your later ones here, and then No Fear, another New York Times bestseller.
Oh yes.
So the accolades that you're stealth shacking up with these imaginary trophies that they're sending you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've heard a rumor. I've been hanging around with too many book lovers and aficionados now. I heard a rumor that there was something due to the change in format of the books that meant they could no longer be New York Times eligible. Is that?
Yes, there was. I think it must have been around about that point. I think, technically speaking, in terms of sales, they all have been since then. But it's just that it's the case of exactly what gets counted in order to qualify as a New York Times bestseller required it to be sold in particular places. And I think that was the point at which Black Library really became its own distributor and seller as much as everything else, was going out in other channels and you could order it directly. So it wasn't a dip in the success of the book. It was where it was going throughout out on sale. But like all these things, any of these bestseller lists have their own criteria for how they measure something, and that was the case with the New York Times. So it's a shame.
That is a shame, because you can imagine the whole list just when a big release came out, just completely going full heresy. But
it was better for Black Library and therefore for the customers, though, because it was much more directly connecting the audience to the publisher from that point on, or roughly that point on. And I think that's a really, really good thing to do. It wasn't. I've got no complaints at all. I think it's great because we could sell directly. Or produce books directly to people who wanted them and that kind of stuff, rather than just like throw them out to the general market and hoping people noticed. So not that there isn't a bit of that already, but you know what I mean. It is more balanced now. It's not putting everything in one basket.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, I'm sure there'll be a video, hopefully by someone like Ian, talking about the structure of Black Library and how it began, and the business model and all of that. And that'd be fantastic, because it is a fantastic success story for us nerdlings. So we're very well. So this is quite a hefty book. There's a lot happens. And
yes.
Don't disappoint right at the beginning. We've got some fairly hefty quotes. Bit of Nietzsche.
Yeah.
When we are tired, we are attacked by ideas we conquered long ago. The philosopher arch Nietzsche, circa M2. And then they are dead, they will not live, they are shades, they will not arise. To that end, you have visited them with destruction and wiped out all remembrance of them. The Apocrypha Terror, Day Unknown. I was just like, oh shit. Oh, no. The very first thing you read. Let's talk about Nietzsche.
Oh, let's.
But he's famously kind of, I might get this completely wrong and you can correct me, pragmatic, accepting of like doom. Nietzsche in this book, it seems to work.
Yeah,
you're a kind of armchair philosopher. Tell me a little bit about that choice.
Well, I don't know. I think it is. It's a pretty grim book. It's in all sorts of ways. I mean, for a start, the novel itself, action-wise, is pretty relentless. It is about one of the great acts of betrayal in the Horus Heresy. It's backs to the walls for not only for the Ultramarines, but particularly because they at that point have not suffered. They are the guys who can do anything. They are the sort of plot armored people who are just like, if anyone's going to save the day, it's going to be them. And for it to be turned upon them in such a brutal way, and for them to be really, really within a hair's breadth of losing, it's like it is the unthinkable.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've had big unthinkable moments prior to that, but in many respects, that is such a shocking turning point. So that it is that doom. I think it's the fact that the Ultramarines themselves are sort of not prepared for it, but not prepared for the idea that if something like this was to happen, that they might actually just not go, right, fine, we'll deal with it. And I think that's part of it. And it is quite a pivotal book. I mean, BL wanted a book about the Battle of Calth, obviously because it's one of the big established lore moments in the Horus Heresy, but actually its implications and sort of what kicks off from that book in terms of where it goes, just sort of the Mark of Calth, for instance, and the fact that that campaign then runs, forever afterwards, and all this kind of stuff is contained within there. It's not just like, oh, it's a pivotal battle that we must give a description of that battle, but the implications and what it implies for Ultramar and Guilliman and the Ultramarines themselves is has repercussions that then knock out right the way through the series, and sort of changes the way Guilliman thinks of himself as a leader, I think.
Wow.
So,
yeah, I mean, I was going to say, it's one of those pivotal, I think you described it to me as, you've got to hit these pivotal points throughout this series. And it's an Ultramarine book. We get used to Graham going full Ultramarine with Europe in the future. So how was this one divvied out, or?
Oh, well, yeah, that was the fun thing. You see, I am actually, I'm fond of the books that I've written. I have to be, because I need to be satisfied with them in order to submit them for publication. And I look back on each one of them fondly in different ways. I am particularly fond of No Fear, even though it's probably the most sort of battle reporty of all of, it is just the depiction of the battle. But at the time, I think as I remember it, we had one of our regular Horus Heresy summits where everybody gathered together and we would discuss what's going on and who's up next and what's going to happen and what's the next thing that needs to be written, and also all those sorts of things. And it was very sort of freeform and relaxed as usual. And the next up was going to be the Battle of Calth. That needed to be written. And sort of everybody looked to Graham, because obviously it was going to be Graham. At no point did we thought that the Battle of Calth wouldn't be written by Graham, because it's Ultramarines. Yeah. And he sort of looked us back at us, and he was, I can't remember what he was doing, but he was quite busy with something. And he said, "What?" And we went, "Well, obviously you get first refusal because it's Ultramarines." And he sort of didn't want to. I think it's because he spends a lot of time writing Ultramarines, and it's like it's not a foregone conclusion that he's the Ultramarine guy and therefore he's got to write it. And there were, like I said, other things that he was doing. So it was like, oh, that's a surprise to everybody that Graham wasn't going, oh, well, obviously I definitely want to write that one. So it was like, oh, well, who was going to write it, because we need it written now? And actually it was my turn to be assigned a book. And so they went, do you want to write it? And I went, well, okay. So it was not a book I was anticipating writing. There wasn't a lot of thinking time in advance. It was, like I said, like everybody else, I had just assumed that Graham was going to be the one who got asked to do it.
Yeah.
And so I went, well, sure, yeah, fine, great. Happy to do it. It's a big deal book to write, and as a result, I think it's because it was so unexpected. I really enjoyed it, because I had to sort of get into it and like, wow, okay, what do I need to do? What's going on here? What's it all about? How do I write Ultramarines, which isn't something that
right? Yeah, that's the question.
How do I write Ultramarines that are the 30k Ultramarines? All these sorts of things, and obviously Ultramarines. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Ultramarines whatsoever, but they have this sort of slightly bad rep because they are the poster boys of 40k. It's like, the sort of within the community, it's like, oh, Ultramarines are boring. Why can't we have some more interesting stuff? Well, okay, let's try and make sure that they are absolutely, not that Graham had ever made them boring, but like let's make sure they're, let's make them cool. Yeah. Let's make people go, oh God, Ultramarines, yeah. And I was thinking about that because that, sort of, in a way, each time I'd written a particular chapter, like the Alpha Legion in Legion and the Space Wolves too, I wanted to go, well, okay, I'm writing this from the point of view of becoming the number one fanboy of this chapter. What's cool about? What can I do with them? What's going to be great? So I sort of approached it the same way. Well, okay, Ultramarines, great. Yeah. What can we say? How can I depict the Ultramarines that make people go, oh yeah, Ultramarines, I want an army. Thank you very much. And the same went for Guilliman himself. Really, it was all of that. Sort of. So yes, I embraced it excitedly and sort of went into it and just went for it. And I realised that there were certain aspects to it. I wanted it to be very action orientated. I wanted it to be, like I said, relentless. That the sort of pace, once the pace picks up, it just does not let go. Yeah, which was a very deliberate thing. So one of the things I did with it. I think it was the first time I'd ever done it. I decided to write it in the present tense. Yeah. So everything was happening now. It's happening now. God. Everything is happening now.
You horrible man.
I know.
It's like a heart attack.
Yeah, and it's something I've done since, because it is very, very effective. But I decided to do that, I think, because I wanted that immediacy of like being there on the ground as it was happening, and also that ties into the whole idea of like the sort of clock that's on it, the count that's going. And the count that will then run on beyond the end of the book. But I wanted that sense of time and that there was no time, and time was ticking away with every passing moment there was a danger. And I just thought, well, I'll do it like that, which was great. It was, however, exhausting to do it. I don't think I'd ever written a novel like that before.
I was going to ask, did this novel give you a nervous breakdown? Not only do you do it in present tense, it's the biggest cast list. I mean, I think the Bible probably has less sons of Moses.
Oh, Willie, you haven't got the Siege of Terror yet, but yes, it has.
Haven't, but Christ on a bike. I mean, Emperor on a bike. I mean,
yeah.
So is this the first novel you've written in present tense? Historica Jamaldis wanted me to ask.
I'm pretty definitely sure it is. I think there have been two since then that have been. So I think The End of the Death largely, and I think the Magos is present tense. The Eisenhorn. The unexpected fourth entry into the Eisenhorn trilogy, which I think is technically, but yeah, it was relentless because I've talked to you about this before. But when you're writing a novel, obviously it takes you weeks or months to do it, so you have to do it a bit at a time, come back to it every day, pick up again where you left off, and all this kind of stuff. And which means that you sort of have to let go of it every day a little bit, walk away, take a breather, come up, pick it back up again. And when you're writing it in present tense, it is so relentless that it doesn't let you do it. It's like, oh, it's still happening in my head. Still happening right now just because of the tense involved, and you come back to it. So it was quite an exhausting process, just because it didn't let me go. But I think that's quite a useful, I mean, is it? But yeah, I think it is quite a useful thing because it means that the relentless pace of the novel did let me go, which meant that I did not let the relentless pace of the novel slip.
Yeah.
There was this breathlessness to everything that I was doing. It's coming back to it. It's got to do the next bit. Got to do the next bit. The next bit's got to happen. And that was a really interesting process to go through.
Yeah, I wanted to. I mean, because we've spoken about your process before, which to me already sounds like this is one of your superpowers. You can hold this in your head, but that to then impose this, and not only present but matching in time to so many cast members of so many, Marine, you've got your infantry, you've got your commoners, you've got your cultists, everyone doing everything all at the same time. It was like that movie, Everything Everywhere all at once. I was really concerned. I was like, that just seems like a big feat to me. Did you have to bring in other resources, or did you just burn your brain out?
Well, so I'm trying to remember what resources I brought in that were unusual. The thing is that each book is its own thing, and actually I quite often like the idea of embarking on a new novel and going, what can I do with this that I haven't done before? What technique or tactic or whatever? What can I employ so that I can, as it were, explore a new way of doing something, but also hopefully produce something that's a bit fresher. So I didn't like go, oh, I wish I'd done that or anything like that. It was just like, it was going for it. I don't remember there being additional apparatus apart from the usual piles of reference that I got, and just having to get used to a different pace of working. So it wasn't any of those things. It was sort of like setting a sort of challenge for myself to do it like that, but not in a kind of showy offy, oh, look at me in my process. It was like, I think this is appropriate for the book, so let's see if I can do it. So that was really where I went with it. It wasn't I don't think you
would have set aside to write, James Joyce Ulysses, consciously, but I just find it fascinating the way sometimes when you come to write books, the subject matter or the way you decide you're going to write it will inform the feeling and the filters that we get as the reader.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I wanted it to feel breathless and urgent for you, so I therefore had to write something that was breathless and urgent, and therefore that meant that I had to be breathless and urgent doing it. And that happens with other things. I mean, I'm sure in fullness of time we will talk about other books like The End of the Death, where this has an even bigger bearing on how I went and did certain things that I did, and why they were very deliberate choices, because I thought that will make the book better, or that will make the book work, or whatever it is. And it was for this, and so yes, I did it with great enthusiasm.
Well, I love it. And as I was preparing my notes for this over the week, I realised probably I could speak to you about this one book for 3 hours. So apologies to anybody for your favourite bit, or that we don't talk about. But I think, again, it just goes to show the amount of love that is put into these books, which is quite unlike any other IP, in my opinion. And there's a lovely thank you at the end, because we mentioned our Graham, and there's thanks to Aaron, Richard, Bruce, Laurie. I'm leaving out surnames because I'm imagining we all know them. Nick, Graham, Lindsay, and Nick. and then the High Lords of Lenton. So at the end, you can see, it takes a village, really, doesn't it?
It does take a village, even if you burn it down at the end. Yes.
Yeah, that made me feel quite reassured that, I was like, yes, he's had his support system.
Yeah.
So this explains this immediacy and the present time, explains the mark system. And Ian explained this to me. The timing begins the minute that the Ultramarines realise, oh, this is bad, and they fire the first shot. So you're giving yourself, a T minus in that respect.
Yes.
That timeline. And were you able to, I mean, obviously because no one was there to experience it, you were able to give it your own kind of restriction amongst that. But did you have an idea? Were you like, oh, I could do, a few weeks, I could eke it out, or I want this all to happen in 24 hours? Did you have any thoughts around that?
Oh yes, yes, I did plan it carefully with reference to whatever law there existed from it. But I wanted that idea of that sort of revert or that countdown to it beginning. And in fact, I have to say that opening, however long it is, section of the book is one of the pieces of writing that I'm proudest of. That increasing crescendo towards the moment where absolutely all hell breaks loose, with the ship coming in and the reader going, oh, that's going to be bad, oh, that's going to be bad, as we keep coming, and we know this tension is mounting and something terrible is going to happen and no one can see it coming. Oh my god, what's going to happen? Until we get to that point, and weirdly and then when you get that moment, I wanted then to deliver the most ridiculously over the top, huge moment of utter devastation, like a disaster movie, with tanks falling out the sky and all this kind of stuff, and people going, oh my god, this is so huge, and then get to that. And I think it's to me, it's one of the moments where Gilliman just shows himself to be incredibly cool, where he's like sort of horrified by what's going on, but he still wants to make sure that it is what it appears to be, and it's not. They're not going to open fire because over some horrible mistake and all this kind of stuff. He can't believe it's happening, so there's got to be another reason. There is another reason, and I think just that line where he goes, "Start the count." To me, I still go,
Yes.
oh yes, that is so badass. That is just, to me, that is one of his great lines. I know I wrote it, but you know what I mean? I agree. There are certain things where I find characters saying things in the books and I go, oh, that is like definitively you. And that moment there is like, everything the book has gone through up to that point. When he goes, start the count, you go, oh, that is the moment. And yeah. So that whole bit, I'd always look back on that and going, that was a really sustained. I can't remember how long it took me to write it. It certainly took me less time to write it than that much of a book would normally take to write, because that was the really bit where I just couldn't leave it alone. I had to keep coming back to it and keeping the momentum going until we reached that point of unleashing. Because so yes, and I was very, very pleased with the way it worked out. So that you sort of, it's great to build up suspension and tension in a book, and to keep ratcheting that up and up and up, and you think, oh, it's unbearable now, I can't get any worse. But then quite often when that tension breaks, it usually breaks in, not anticlimactically, but it's like there is a sense of relief. Whereas with that, I wanted to break, it was like, oh my god, it's even worse than I thought it was going to be.
I mean, yeah, there were they're very typical Dan, tearing the heart out moments. Not literally with Corfarian at the end, but where you think that Lucille and Chur are chatting and you think, oh, but these two are friendly. Like, will they have this kind of like camaraderie and, throughout the war, and they're sadly on the wrong side, and you like their friendship. And I was like, oh no, one's just gonna flaunt. You haven't seen it. This is a heresy. I'm going to kill you now. And I was like, like watching a kitten die. It was really, that was absolutely unbearable. It was awful. And every time Gilliman comes into the narrative, you're like, Gilliman, wake up!
Yeah.
Shit's been going down. And I think you caught that kind of ultramarine. We have our processes. You see the naughty space marine with his red helmet kicking his heels. You've got that sense of discipline, but really you just want to shake him and say, things are not going well, So yeah, I think that was masterfully crafted. That was fabulous. And I think the thing is that there is always a danger in the Warhammer universe, because everybody is so volatile and violent all the time, with good reason. Let me qualify that, with good reason.
but there is always a danger that it becomes that trope that I obviously experience a lot in, say, superhero comics, where it's absolutely fine, but characters will meet, there'll be a misunderstanding over something, and then they'll have a fight just to, isn't it cool to have a fight between these characters, and then they'll realize that it was all a mistake, and I'm thinking, actually, that's that. Even in the 40k universe, that's not how the military works. Do you know? Because if it did, you know what I mean? You don't mess around. You don't take chances when you've got that kind of level of firepower and hugeness and all that kind of stuff. So, and if there's a disciplined, ordered chapter with a great method, or legion in this case, with a great methodology, it's the Ultramarines. You know, they want to make sure of these things because they know that when they will unleash themselves, it's going to be devastating. And I thought that was that almost that sense of restraint was more realistic rather than just going, okay, let's shoot some people and find out what's going on. No, we want to make sure we understand what we're getting into, and I think that's great. And obviously, and ironically, of course, this was the very book in which that caution, or rather that being sensible, let's put it that way, just being sensible and working by the book was actually not the best thing to do, because if they had just gone, oh my god, this is bad, and reacted sooner, then great. But that's the point of it. That's the point of it. You know, the word bearers do what they do because they know that the Ultramarines will react in a particular way, and actually they can get quite a long way before that is, because what they're doing is unthinkable. And Gilliman has sort of predicted all the things that could possibly happen, and here's the thing that he didn't predict could possibly happen.
No.
So I think it's sort of showing their character both as individuals and as legions.
Yeah.
That they stick to their own sets of rules and do what they should do, which is, I find that quite satisfying. I don't think it makes the Ultramarines look stupid. I think it makes the Ultramarines ultimately look pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
Because they didn't falter and just like run around with their hands in the air and forget all the things they'd ever been trained to do.
Yeah. Just
because something bad had happened. They went, no, this is how we respond. This is our emergency response. And we're responding, okay, and we're waiting for Gilliman to give the word. He's given the word. And that's, you know.
Oh, and yeah, I mean, I really loved keeping up in between the chapters. We had the battle reports. We had Gilliman's text, you know, taken from various. Yeah. That kind of kept up that whole feeling. And then, you know, the names of the different chapters: Target Acquisition, Target Engage, Ushgul-Thu, Ruin Storm, and then Undoing. I was just like, each of those titles really hit you. So we get some really lovely things that I don't think we would have got if a different Black Library author had looked at it this way. We get the Perpetuals back, and we get a little bit of Gaunt's Ghost in, you know, Ragtag Band of Survivors.
Yes.
A love story that turns into be, you know, it's a demon. So some fantastic, you know, Dan Abnett isms in there. So let's talk about this. So Ol Pearson, now this would be me. I just want to be on a planet growing flowers half the year, sport grass the rest of it. I'm retired. I'm out of the business, and then bloody John Chromaticus comes back and says, "You got one more job."
Just when he thought he was out, he pulls him back in.
And I'm speeding to the end of the book, but at the end of the book, we have one of my most hated characters, Erebus, stepping out of the fabric of the universe. But also, to counterbalance, we have Ol Pearson doing the same. We also discover that he was a companion of Jason and the Argonauts.
We do, yes.
Remember? Chasing down some shaggy old fleece and some other, you know. So we get to understand, if you've missed the Perpetuals, he's lived a long time. So this is very much, he popped up in John Grammaticus popped up in Legion. That's where we learned about.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm imagining you're now thinking, now I know a little bit more. There's tremendous foreshadowing. Bearing in mind, you're going to do another 40 books. So at this stage, book 19, is that, because obviously now you're all thinking, we only thought this was going to be a few books. We're now nearly at book 20. How is this mapping out in your head with the Perpetuals, for instance, as one of those nodes that you're?
I think we had all once I had proposed the idea of using the Perpetuals and particularly with Grammaticus in Legion. That was like one of the things that we had in play that we were dealing with. And it's like, well, that's everybody agreed that was a thread that should go in, and then once it was in, it's like, well, that's a thread that needs to play out, and it does. And I'm spoiler alert, because obviously, yes, it does beyond the point at which you've read in a pretty major way. And so there was a sense of wanting to flesh that out a little bit and show a little bit more about what was going on, and maybe find a little bit of redemption for John Grammaticus as well, and all this sort of stuff. So that's all. By that stage, that was something, and I was sort of the cheerleader for it. I know, and some of the readers love it, and some of the people just go, "Oh, what's this? Get in the way of good Space Marine on Space Marine action," both here and later on. It's like, well, you can't please everybody, and we're putting in things that we think are interesting. We think this is a thread that is really, really interesting to follow. So I was at that point, with the approval of the team, setting all sorts of things up that was going in a very, very specific direction, which you will get to eventually. So, but yes, it's there is a lot of other things that float around that.
Yeah. I'm pleased to hear that. I do like the Perpetuals. Their characters are normally ones you root for and you get along with. So could the Emperor have been a Perpetual? Or
the idea is that he's a Perpetual or Perpetual adjacent, yes, and that again, that is explored later on a little bit, but it's the idea that they're just people who've been around for a long time, and therefore they have both a sense of the scope of history and a weariness of it, but also they have a sense of the scope of the Emperor's own history and what he's done. It's not like they're not that they're recently born and going, well, the Emperor's been around forever, he must be good. They're going,
Also, they say there are only 5 of them left. So
yes,
that just really, I love that. And when you look at the pie chart, the percentage of the different characters you get, there's a very little triangle for that storyline, old person, but it's really intriguing. So I'm a big fan of that. I love that. So it just goes to show how potentially, had Graham or one of the other authors written this, they may not have had this place in this time in the story. They might have had to re-emerge.
They might not have done it. It's interesting. It's almost impossible now in hindsight to speculate about that. I think the idea of putting Ol into this book, was locked down fairly early on because we didn't do things necessarily without approval. The interesting thing is that it's possible that if somebody else has written No Fear, that wouldn't have been where Ol's storyline was picked up on. Maybe somebody said, well, let's leave it to the next, whatever the next one is that Dan writes.
Yeah.
And we'll find a way of sort of bringing him into the storyline there instead, whatever that would be. But yes, it seemed like the best possible starting point. It's and so I executed it that way, and yes, for all the things that would then later happen, which I'm trying my hardest not to spoil for you.
Thank you. We do so well in these chats. I bet people who've read all the books are absolutely incandescent with rage. I'm sorry about it. Stick with the theory. I mean, the whole scope of the story, the spaceship sundering the earth, cleaving the whole earth in twain, flipping tanks falling everywhere, people being crushed, under various bits of, tank or spaceship. And Old Pearson's perspective was immense, but we also got biker marines, we got proper battle, siege conditions, we had skirmishes, we had demon fights. Crikey.
Yes.
I mean, it's very, very epic scale. And what you were saying at the very beginning, that quiet diplomacy, the calm before the storm, lent so much to the breadth and width of that. And at the very beginning, we've got Theo, one of my favourites, a naughty space marine.
Yes, he's a favourite of mine too, yes.
What a fantastic conceit. And obviously I was thinking, well, this characterful person has got to come up later, but he's put to kind of kick his heels in, an old antique weapons museum, and I'm imagining, there'll be like a Klingon blade there, and then there'll be this, all the things they've picked up along the way. And then the conceit, the reveal, he was in trouble because he was studying how to kill space marines.
Yeah.
I love that conceit. And also what a wedge to kind of think in, because prior to this point it was unthinkable. So tell me a little bit about Feel and yeah, where that came.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to populate the story with some interesting characters, and I like the idea of somebody who the Ultramarine. It seems to me one of the things the Ultramarines do is kind of speculate on all the possible things that they could do. They're sort of like the proactive version of Dawn. Dawn is constantly examining every possible plan to see its flaw and how to protect things and this kind of stuff. And they're to me, the Ultramarines are sort of the same thing, only in terms of an offense.
Yeah.
You know, what are we going to meet and how will we deal with it? And sooner or later, one of them was bound to come up with the unthinkable as like, well, we might have to do this. And I just wanted a character there who was the one who would dare to think it.
Yeah.
And therefore, at the right time, as it were, or just prior to the right time. I also wanted to play around with other things, like the idea that the Ultramarines, obviously, their sergeants wear the red helmets, and I like the idea that came from a different place,
Yes.
and became a mark of honor. And yes, I just liked him I like the idea, because you could do this in the Horus Heresy era, of a slightly insubordinate Space Marine, which again is unthinkable, and so the idea that they have personalities and they have free will and they think about these things and they talk about these things, and they so it was in some respects the whole book patterns, by looking at the Ultramarines the way it does, the whole book patterns what I think is generally, not universally, but generally typical of a Space Marine Legion in 30k, as opposed to a Space Marine chapter in 40k, which is the whole idea that they are aware of how dangerous they are. They are absolutely prepared. They assume for everything, and they're also feeling people who are interested in other things alongside war. And if peace, like this was like with Horus in the first book, if peace is ever an option, that's preferable to having to be Space Marines all over the place.
Yeah.
So I think that there is that set pattern, whereas now it's much more a case in 40k, it's much more a case of Space Marine chapters being constantly prepared for war, expecting it, and the only delay ever there is the negotiations of pacts and oaths and agreements and treaties as to whether they will involve themselves or not. It's not a case of, is it right to do this or not? It's like, well, it does this pseudo feudal reality allow us to do this, or are we going to offend somebody else? So it's quite a different way of going to war. And in this particular instance, it's about attack on them themselves, and how they, even in the light of that, they go, well, let us consider this, what's actually happening, all that kind of stuff. So Theal was I think one of the reasons I put him in and made him the way he was, he's sort of the because the reader knows more about what's going on from an early point. He feels sort of the reader's mouthpiece for going, but stop mucking about, get on with it. And I think we needed to hear somebody say that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, again, I didn't want to make them look stupid. I just wanted to make them look very, very disciplined with what they did.
Yeah.
And so having a slightly undisciplined one of them was a nice touch. I actually have, he's not in this room, he's upstairs, but I actually have a lovely large-scale figure of Theal with the red helmet, and that a friend of mine constructed for me, which is, that's how much I like him.
Oh, that's fabulous. I just thought he was absolutely charming, likable character. Wasn't like, I'm going to rebel. He was just, thought very differently, and there was a lot of humour around him, that when the other Space Marines were like, oh, bloody hell, this guy, there was quite a lot of like humour that came in as a result of him, but then he also helped save the day. So I really loved him. He was great. I still can't believe you orchestrated all of this. Let's talk about demons, because the demons are out now. So we've seen, the warp is kind of getting its way in. The first heretic we saw poor, I've forgotten his name. The first one to get the demon up him, Argyle.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry. How do we remember?
I hope that is inscribed upon the plinth in his memory. The first one to get a demon up him.
Phil got a demon up him. Well, Phil got it, didn't he? But like now, I mean, we do see in the conversations with Guilliman talking to Lorgar, I've got a page note here, where the demons are evident. They are in full effect. There's no way of disguising it. These are warp creatures that have kind of got into it. And there's a great line here from Lorgar. Oh, Rabute, I can always rely on you to sound like a giant pompous asshole. Come and get me. We'll see who burns first. And I was like, I love that so much. But there's a moment where Gilliman sees what go. I won't read all of it, but it starts. Yeah, Gilliman senses it. He turns back. He sees it. His eyes widen. He can smell it. He can smell the pitch black nightmare, the cosmic stench of the warp. The thing is growing, still growing. Lorgar's empty skin sloughs off like a snake's. And then just zooming forward a little bit, filthy light veils it and invests it like velvet robes. It is a shadow and it is smoke. Its crest is the horns of an aurochs, 4 meters high, ribbed and brown. It snorts. There's a rumble of intestines and gas, of a predator's growl, a smell of blood, a whiff of acid, a tang of venom. Like, so we're out now, and the thing speaks. It's no longer Lorgar speaking. Gwilliman sweeps back to face the nightmare, the thing that is no longer Lorgar. His hand reaches for the hilt of his sword. The thing speaks. Its voice is madness. Rebute, it says, let the galaxy burn. It lunges, jaws wide, spittle flying. So, I wasn't really expecting. I mean, I don't know what I thought. I thought the Primarchs were still Primarchs, but as I've kind of gone on to the next book, and Fulgrim's also got this very visible demon. This is kind of like the hard reveal in a way, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, I suppose that is. There have been several big reveals to certain sectors of the universe in the novels up to that point. I mean, but most of them have either been localized or covered up. And although this isn't as grandly public as it could possibly be, this is not like somebody turning up on the steps of the Palace of Terror and going, "Oi, this is going on." A blatant attack on Calth and therefore the Ultramar and all this kind of stuff is about as public as you're going to go. Yeah. And to go absolutely all out and saying, "Yes, it is Space Marines. We're attacking you. Oh, by the way, we've brought some demons with us." It's like, yeah, we're not going to play around anymore. And I think there is weirdly that sense almost of release that the war is now open, absolutely open. There is there's no doubt about what's going on anymore, and that when you've got like Ultramar and Gilliman and everything aware, then there's no more time for sort of pretense or pretending that it's something else or anything like that. So yeah, it is quite a pivotal moment, I think, in terms of that sort of the idea that what was a secret heresy before is now an absolute open blasphemy.
Yeah. And so what does that mean about, talking about Nietzsche and existential stuff, what does that mean for Lorgar and Fulgrim? Are they no longer Lorgar and Fulgrim? Are they still...
well, how long have you got? It is very complicated because of the way in which first of all, the way the warp and chaos corrupts individuals, particularly very powerful individuals like Primarchs, and whether they become, in the case of some of them, like what they call demon princes, whether they are sort of invested to a huge power, or whether they are simply sort of eclipsed by something that takes their form. And actually, I think we, generally speaking, try and keep that somewhat vague to allow people to explore that mystery, because the warp is essentially, chaos is essentially unknowable. So exactly what is happening is anybody's guess, because it's anybody's guess, and all I can do is portray it in ways that make people go, "Oh my god, that's all,"
Yeah.
But it's so yes, there is that as sort of the idea that some individuals are ascending to a form of demonhood, if not godhood, thanks to chaos. But exactly what that entails, and exactly what they're giving up, and exactly how much of them is left when they get there is another question entirely. The interesting parallel there, which again is something that you will come to as you read the books further, is characters like Abaddon, who sort of are going, "I don't know, that's a good idea," even though they are themselves part of it. That they exercise an extraordinary degree, I suppose, of self-control or restraint, and going, I just don't think that's what we should be doing, even if we are using some of this. So there's that interesting power. There is clearly a complete and utter madness that accompanies that, no matter how sane they sound. And that is in itself part of the way that we begin. I think there's sort of the initial differences between the Primarchs become even more emphatically strange and profound once some of them start becoming their chaotic version of themselves. And yes. I mean, also as it said there in the bit you quoted, it's about a nightmare. It's about all the things unraveling. I mean, there's I suppose at that point there was still a possibility that Gilliman himself going, this is a nightmare. This can't possibly be my brother. This can't possibly be all these things. There's got to be another explanation from it. I'm a lovely, rational person. What else? What else could possibly explain this? And the horror being is, well, no, actually, it is exactly what it appears to be, and that is intrinsically unknowable, which is yeah.
Oh, I love asking you these questions. Sometimes I feel dumb because I'm like, I should now have a knowledge of where we are, who that is, what that is, but it's
No, not necessarily. And bear in mind that obviously the continuity of individual characters through the Horus Heresy shifts and sometimes works in parallel. So sort of next book you read where you pick up on that, you'll probably get more information about it, which will then change your understanding of interpretation of what you saw earlier, because this is it's a progressive rolling program, and sometimes we did some things are done, some things are sort of glamour and magical effect, and it's like, oh, that didn't really happen, but that's what I saw happen. And sometimes no, you actually did see that happen, and this is what that means, or there's all sorts of different things like that. I think it's like anything, it's the dramatic theatre of what is being portrayed to you at the time that's the important thing. And then later on you can reflect upon it, and later on you can read another book that might go, oh, that's given me some more information to understand what I was witnessing there or what I wasn't witnessing there.
Okay, I'll take that and keep bravely on finding out what happens next. So another thing somebody wanted me to mention, Space Marines in space, Primarchs in space, where we have this epic battle where you think, oh no, Ultramarines are going to be smashed. And then Gilliman comes out and is able to kind of be in the kind of this very thin bubble of air around space. So in Deliverance Lost, we saw that Corax had this superpower where he was able to kind of be invisible, kind of go unseen. So were we thinking, so does Gilliman have a special, is this one of the Primarch superpowers, survival in space?
I think that generally speaking is under certain circumstances, Primarchs are so superhuman that their basic robustness. When you consider that even Space Marines are bioengineered in all sorts of ways that make them resistant to extraordinary amounts of damage. They've got 2 hearts for a start. All these sorts of different things. There's multiple redundancies. They can hold their breath for an enormously long time. They can stand extreme pressures. They can stand all sorts of things like that. It doesn't seem to me to be a massive stretch to assume that a Primarch with sort of demigod-like capabilities could, for a limited period, survive something that would seem to be utterly lethal to anybody else. There are some Primarchs, Vulcan stands out as an example of that, who genuinely do have extraordinary powers that you go, wait a minute, he did what? So that there are those sorts of things. But there it was a matter of practicality. I mean, he's taking huge risks, but he knows there is a residual atmosphere where he is. And therefore, he goes for it. I mean, the cover of the book, which Neil did a brilliant job with the cover, has got a sort of got these sort of notorious moments of that sort of thing, where sort of the idea of Gilliman without a helmet in space punching someone's head off.
A perfection.
Which is
so good.
And I actually, weirdly, now I'm mentioning, I'm trying to remember which came first. Whether I wrote the thing and went, I double dare you to not let me do this, and then Neil went, fine, I'm going to paint that, or whether Neil had begun to paint something and I went, oh my god, that's just so cool. Quick, before they asked him to revise it, we did. I can't remember which way around it was, but it was very much we were going on like, hell. We've got to emphasize this. If this is not an Imperial Guard book, if you see what I mean. If this was an Imperial Guard story, that wouldn't be Gaunt on the cover going, I'm just going to hold my breath for 10 seconds and venture out of the airlock. It's like, this is within the parameters of the biological and metabolic capabilities of the characters we're talking about, some of which have not been tested to their limits. So let's just do something absolutely over the top and ridiculous, and just enjoy it.
Well, I think it worked really well, because we are witnessing the Ultramarines taking inhumane losses, like they're on the back foot. So that there's no way they can win this space battle, and yet completely unexpected, get a Primarch in the mix. So I thought that was fantastic, because it's just not.
it certainly does demonstrate the importance of the Primarchs, not only as figureheads and leaders, but again, this is something that happens at different times in the Horus Heresy and the Siege of Terror, where the presence of a Primarch at a particular point is the important thing that makes the difference.
Yeah.
Because they just, by their very presence, it shifts the way something would have otherwise gone. And I think it also reflects, in terms of No Fear, I think it reflects the idea that the Ultramarines do their best to know no fear through the course of this, even in their darkest hour, and therefore they also don't, to as much as possible, they don't resort to desperation, even though it is a desperate moment. And by rights, any force would have gone, we're really up against it now. But for those little things like that, no matter how not desperate Guilliman appears, the very fact that he does something like that, going, oh yeah, you're taking risks now. You're taking risks. So in other words, the desperation of the situation and their feeling about it is implicit in their very actions, even if they do seem still to be like, oh yeah, we're just going to do this. So I like the idea that we see them sort of slightly cracking to that point.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, I was very excited. I always really like it when we see the particular intricacies of the superhumanness of the Primarch. So for me, it's fantastic. And then, so I guess one of my favorite bits was Coolfarin getting his heart pulled out. Finally, because the baddies they get to next time gadget and go away and leaving all this devastation. So I really appreciated that. I've felt that was one for all of us.
Yes.
So that was brilliant. And then he gets chased away in this book, McCragg's
He does. Yes.
Book.
Yes.
So that's like an additional extra, like it fills in the gap. So how did that come about?
Again, I'm trying to remember that. I think it's the only time we've done that, where we've sort of spun a story off into a different format. And I think it was the fact that that at the time I knew that particular part of the story, which is canonical, it wasn't like something I was making up for the fun of it.
Yeah.
Would have sat awkwardly within the framework of what the actual novel was going to be, because it does go off literally at a tangent. And we speculated on the idea of telling that story separately, and they Black Library was really keen. Neil's brilliant. They're really keen to use him and get him to do a graphic novel. And so we went, well, why don't we literally do that? Because it's so visual, and he'll be able to do that. So we did, and it was a fun thing to do. I wish there'd been an opportunity to do that sort of thing slightly more often, because I think there are, as it were, a lot of fairly important size. Yeah, there you go. Look how insane that man is.
So cool. Yeah. But I think also you have your background in comics, don't you? So
yes,
for you to get to do some comic-y stuff in the Black Library, that feels like obviously we should do this. So
yeah, I think because when they first hired me way at the start of things back in the 90s, the idea first of all was to do comic strips, which I did a few comic strips for them when they were doing comic strip short stories, and then the novels, and they found that the novels were by far and away the most popular, successful, and well-received things that they were doing, simply because that's what the audience wanted. They wanted to read prose about these things. So comics have never. Comics are sort of literally, because you're producing artwork, is a slightly more expensive thing to do, and therefore it's never had the same sort of impact as the novel. But I think there was just this feeling there that wouldn't it be nice? Let's do that. Let's see what happens. And as I say, Neil did a brilliant job, but it was a massive undertaking. It's also rare so it was good for me to be able to say, yes, I'm going to bring my comic skills to bear again to the Black Library. That's really, really nice, and see what we can do to do a story that was ultimately very, very visual. But it's also very rare, even for a seasoned comic pro like me who writes a lot, to get to write a full-length graphic novel. Because most of the things that people in shops talk about as being graphic novels are actually trade paperbacks collecting comic series that have run in shorter installments, either as individual monthly issues or as weekly installments in 2000 AD or whatever else like that. To actually be commissioned from the outset to produce a comic strip that will run for X number of pages as a single unit and will not be published in a broken down form before that is unusual, because the pacing is completely different. So that in itself was a real treat. And I tried to give Neil as much flexibility as I could, so that it was almost art-led. He got a script, but I said, if you think of something to do here, that's great. We can adjust and go work around it, and I will re-script to fit it in if you thought of something brilliant to do. So yeah.
Wow.
It was fun.
Well, yeah. I don't know how rare this is. It's probably about £500 on eBay, but it's absolutely beautiful. And there's some moments where, if you've wondered what it's like being in the warp, I mean, the way that it's drawn is just, it's so
Yes.
fantastic. So yeah, definitely. If people are following Just Heresy, definitely get this one as well, because it's
Yes. I
quite
think
wonderful.
it's long due a reissue. I think Black Library should
I
put out another
agree.
edition of it.
Well, my theory and hope is that when, apparently there's this big TV collaboration coming, everyone's going to start liking Warhammer. There's going to be loads of noobs in the hobby, and they'll just go, quick, reissue one of everything. Let's do
Yeah, yeah.
all the heresy, all the bits, and that will be the fruits of that TV show. More books for everybody. So that's my hope. So we shall see what happens there. And I guess I'm going to wait to have to see where Erebus and Old Person have gone. Old person. Very good, Dan. So
Yeah, you see what I did there?
I did, and
And
I love it.
and I didn't just do that there, but you won't know yet what that is. But yes, there's
Yeah.
yes, multiple meanings. I think it's quite lovely. I mean, now that we have obviously over the last few years, we've got into the habit of talking on a fairly regular basis. As you slowly work through the back catalogue, every time you reach one of my books, we have another conversation. And I'm becoming increasingly aware now that it's actually one big, long, continuous conversation, because
Yes.
we talk about something and I go, yes, but in X number of months or indeed even years' time, when you reach point X, I'll be able to say the bit of that
I
I wasn't able to say during this conversation because I know where it goes. And that's lovely. Because again, part of the joy of this conversation for me is to talk to somebody who is reading this for the first time, and that's the point at which they've got to. Because so often, pleasant though they are, you get interviewed by people who've read everything and want to look back as a sort of overview of all this kind of stuff, and they've got
Yeah.
that sort of that kind of hindsight and so let's talk about this and how it led to this and that kind of stuff. Whereas there is it's very much present tense, just like you see what I did there. It's present tense, like no, which is I think a really exciting way of doing it as a
I
book
agree.
club, because readers who are keeping up with you or readers that are coming to it are experiencing it now, not experiencing it whenever. It's
Yeah.
so yeah.
I mean, I always need to remind myself there are people in this hobby who are my age now who've never not known everything about them because they first went into a Games Workshop in 85, 86.
Mm-hmm.
And they've had this length of understanding from 40k before even these heresy books came out. So for me to kind of come in and ask things like, are they Primarchs or are they demons? I think there is potentially a group of us who do need those, who kind of
Yeah.
came later. And I can't let you go without the last thing that I've scribbled all over the place, and I did a little video, I think, about it. The end and the death, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently I missed this completely. It comes into the heresy earlier, but there's a moment on page 339. I'm like, the end and the death.
Yes. Well,
And
yes. I
yes,
think yes.
so it's Ventantus, and he can hear something.
Mm.
Samus. That's the only name you'll hear. Samus. It means the end and the death. Samus. I
Yes.
am Samus. Samus is all around you. Samus is the man beside you. Samus will gnaw on your bones. Look out, Samus is here. And of course, we have end and the death.
Yes, and I think you'll find that the other book behind you on the other side, Horus Rising, I think that's where the words first appear, because the demon is haunting there at the end there. But again, at the time, nobody noticed that. But when Loken encounters the demon, the lines there, that's one of the main reasons I used that as the title for the last book, is because it gets mentioned in the very first one. It's a quote there from the very first book. It's not just me going.
Did you have any idea when you wrote that in here?
No, I would be a complete and utter liar if I said that The End and the Death was written into the first book because I knew it was going to be the title of the last one. That is nonsense. But when I came to look for the good titles for the last book, I obviously went back to all what I thought were the key recurring phrases from my work on the heresy, and indeed everybody's work on the heresy. There are lots of key phrases that get said a lot, and it's like it should be one of those. And this goes back to such an important point. That sort of first prophecy that we get in the very first book, and in some respects, I think The End of the Death is a weirdly catchy title, and it seems to have landed well with people, except that it's actually a very odd, simple phrase, and it's sort of not the way somebody would say it. No, It could be from anywhere, and it's sort of there. It feels like there'll be more poetic ways, more dramatic ways of saying the end of the death, except that's that strange way the demon had of speaking, and therefore it's sort of, I think it's sort of lodged and connected, and it actually has a power as an overly simple phrase. It has a power quite beyond the frame of the words that compose it, and that's why it's got so much impact. But yes, once we got those sort of repetitions going on, and obviously No Fear is one of the places where the echo starts to happen, and people are going, I heard that before. Oh, yeah. And you go, well, that those words alone have a momentum that have got to go somewhere.
Yeah. No, that was fantastic. I was like, what a payoff after 19 books. Oh, no, it's happening. But and I'm interested to see this demon because he's been on the journey quite consistently as well. But yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Oh my God, there's a future conversation we're going to have. You'll be shouting at me by the time we get there.
I love it. I'm so happy. But you need to be careful because, when it comes to your tombstone and what's going to be on there, it can't say Dan Abnett at the end of the death, but you've got to be really careful because...
No, I've got a feeling it's going to be the first one to get a demon up in. That's why. Oh Lord. Just me next to Lorgar. Call Farron. I don't know. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well, I think that's a lovely remark to end our interview.
Yes, that's a charming and entirely appropriate remark too.
Dan, thank you so much, and I will see you next time.
I look forward to it already.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
This book tells of the destruction of Calf, a jewel of the Ultramar sector. The reds are mean and they're really bad. The